Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we'll talk about the most recent research in evolutionary science with our guest who offers men and women 12 new fuels for living a fully authentic life, loving deeply and well, and making a positive difference in the world. Now, according to our guest, the division of life into male and female began 1 billion years ago. Men can't be fully alive, according to him, alive to themselves, to the women they love, and to their families and friends unless they understand and embrace their gift of maleness. Masculinity today, according to our guest, is maligned and misunderstood, and he believes in the reality of beauty, goodness, and the mystery of the male spirit. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Jed Diamond, who's going to be talking about his 16th book, and we're going to be talking about the maleness of the men alive. Jed, thank you for being on the program today.
Well, it's good to be with you. Nice to hear the introduction, and I appreciate it.
You know, it's so rare that we actually talk about something like this because it seems today everybody has, their way of saying, I want to express what I believe and what I feel, and sometimes, that kind of gets lost in the wash. What's going on today?
Well, I think there's a lot of fear and confusion. I've been a psychotherapist and marriage and family counselor for 50 years now, and the truth is relationships are difficult. Relationships bring out the best and worst of us, but increasingly we're living in a world that's very stressed and impacts individuals, it impacts our relationships, it impacts our politics and our communities. And I think we're living at a time where there's just a great deal of fear and confusion that makes everything worse. So part of what I try to do is to help people get back tuned into themselves, to let go of the fears that are so prevalent, and to really find the deeper connections with ourselves and with our partners.
When you think about the state of affairs today, everybody seems to want to be correct, about their opinions. And in your book, 12 Rules for Good Men, you get to a point where gender identification seems to be very confusing. Who are we supposed to be? In fact, my wife had just pointed out as we went to go and see the newest Terminator movie that it seemed to have lead roles that were feminine and, taking care of business. I mean, there they were, doing what they do. And you kind of wonder to yourself, okay, so what's going on in the state of affairs today? Those rules of leadership and men just kind of being put to side and being more sensitive, and that sort of a thing. And you get to wonder, well, where is our role? Are we sort of becoming misidentified with who we are?
Well, I think there are two issues that I see. One is we have been living at a time where everybody is disconnected. We grow up in families where many times children are disconnected from their parents. We grow up in homes where a parent is absent through divorce or dislocation or distance or overwork. There's all kinds of ways in which the roles of parents are not as connected as they once were. And we also live at a time, quite honestly, where we're disconnected from the whole planet that our whole support system. We're heating up the planet in ways that are destructive and puts us at risk of extreme weather conditions. I live here in California, and we've had, again, extreme weather conditions and fires. We see this going on all over the world. So one of the problems is that we're not only disconnected from our traditional roles, but we're disconnected from the very foundations of what makes us human. And when that happens, then males and females struggle trying to find something that they can hold on to. And as you described, we either hold on to the old roles, the Terminator being example, the macho go out and, kick butt and take control, or we do the opposite. And okay, now men aren't going to do that anymore. Now women are going to step forward, and it's not, in my mind, a both an accurate, in terms of our biology and our evolution, an accurate portrayal of who men and women really are. It's more a modern dysfunction, often women taking on the very dysfunctional roles that men have once had. That isn't an advance in my mind. I think we need to get back to a real understanding of who we are as men, who we are as women, and they're not the macho roles that society has demanded of us. Those need to change, but it doesn't follow that if we change the roles, we need to either reverse them, and now women can be as bad as men, or men now need to give up all their sense of maleness and just become the new age sensitive man that just is totally into his feelings and, is totally inept or unable to act, with resolve and clarity. So there's a lot that people have to learn, and that's why I wrote the book 12 Rules for Good Men, to give both men and women the experience that I've learned over these many years of counseling and writing, to give men and women some clarity about how we can be in the world today in a way that workable, the way that acknowledges our biology and our evolution, and also acknowledges the changing roles that we want to have that can make us better people in the long run.
Now, let's go ahead and, if you will, if we could talk about the 12 rules and give people an understanding about your book.
Well, to give you a little beginning of it, I'd tell you a little bit about the origin of the book and the origin of the whole concept of it. I had finished 15 books, and I was ready to do some other things. I thought 15 books was a reasonable body of work, and my wife has kind of had a husband that's been off doing writing and not as available. So I told her, listen, I want to shift gears here. I want to do some other things. And I thought she'd be very happy. I thought she would say, hey, I'm so happy you have more time. But what she said was, you need to write another book. You need to write a book that really gives guidance to men and women and gives them some real sense of the goodness in men, the positive things about what it means to be a man. And that was the origin of the 12 rules. So let me just give you a couple of them to start us off, because this will give you an idea of the value and the understanding of this. The first one I said is to join a men's group. And the reason I say this, I've been in a men's group that's been meeting now for 40 years. And my wife and I, who've been now together for 39 years, she says the thing that she thinks has been most helpful to our 39-year marriage is that I've been in a men's group for 4 years. And I think what she recognizes is that throughout evolutionary history, men have been in men's groups. Men hunted together, men, went out together in groups, and men learned from each other and learned to support each other and learned, what it means to be, a good man, a lot by learning from other men. And now we've lost that. Men don't operate in males groups. The society in some ways has said men who are just in all male groups, there's something the matter with that. We need, women need access. And women certainly need to have greater access to many parts of the world, but men need men's groups and women need women's groups. So joining a men's group is the first rule for what it means and what will help people be good men. And I tell people how to do that. I give you examples from my men's group. And the second one I call rule number 2 is break free from the man box. And what's the man box? Well, you gave an example right at the beginning, the kind of movies that we're told this is what it means to be a man, the Terminator. You need to be tough. You need to be, you need to fight for, enemies all around you. You need to suppress your feelings. You need to kill. You need to, hurt other people in order to prove that you're manly. Those kind of, beliefs are ones that have not served us. They have created a certain way of being in the world that we know is not only not healthy. Men die not just in wars, but in heart attacks, getting cancer, all kinds of diseases because we suppress our feelings. We close down our emotions. We only let anger out. So we need to break those old patterns. And as I pointed out earlier, it doesn't help to say, well, now we're going to let women, play the role of male and play the most dysfunctional aspects of the male roles. It doesn't help us to say, great, we'll break males out of that box and let males be more fully human in themselves, but we'll let women now take over the roles of being a dysfunctional male. That's not the answer. So then we get into 10 more aspects of rules and guidances that I've found to be helpful in my, almost 50 years of practice now. That's just a little introduction to what we're going to be exploring in the 12 Rules for Good Men.
You look at it today, too, and it seems that men really have a difficult time as they're growing up because of a lack of male figures, fathers, for instance,
right.
That are there showing them how to be men. What are we supposed to do, that sort of a thing. So when it comes to this, how do you take a look at this and say, well, how can this possibly change, especially for men who are reaching midlife, to get that sort of identification to where they can be, proud of who they are, to be men, and not try to surrender and be something other than who they are?
Well, one of probably the most common and most destructive aspects of men as we get older is that whatever connections we've been able to maintain with friendships, with connections with buddies, with people that we can really talk to, not just somebody we can golf with or play sports with, somebody we can talk deeply to and talk about what really is going on inside. We get less and less of that as we get older. And as a result, there are two really destructive things that happen. When men become more isolated, and this seems to be more common in older men than in older women, we start developing more physical illnesses. We've shown that there's a connection between things like heart attacks, things like emphysema, breathing problems, things like depression, and the fact that men are becoming more isolated. The other thing that is, I think, probably the most significant indicator of dysfunction with men as we get older is the rise in depression and suicide. We know that, for instance, that the suicide rate for males in their 50s is 5 times higher than it is for women in their 50s. I mean, think about that. If it were reversed, if there was a disease that struck men 5 times more prevalently than it did women, women would be up in arms. They'd be, what's the matter? We need to do something. That's true of the male condition. 5 times the suicide rate for 50-year-old or men in their 50s compared to women. And then it goes up from there as we get more into the retirement years. When we get into our 60s, the rate is 7 times higher for males than for females. And listen to this, probably the fastest growing demographic in the world, but certainly in the United States and developed countries, is people that are living to be 80 and above. Used to be very rare. Now it's very common for us to live into our 80s. And the suicide rate for males in their 80s is 18 times higher than it is for women in their 80s. So we need, this should be, it has for me, it needs to be alarm bells that's saying what's happening for males throughout our lives, because the suicide rate is higher at every age, but particularly as we get older. And the key finding from our research seems to be that it's the isolation, the not connecting with friends, the not keeping friends, the not being in really supportive men's groups as we get older, that really is at the core of the depression and the suicides that are more prevalent as we age into our later years.
When you also take a look, too, about the message that's being sent out there, it's, a lot of times you see men entangled in what are reports and even, allegations of, sexual misconduct, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a lot of arguments going on out there about how men are just overly aggressive. And it's sad because most of the time, that doesn't seem to really be the case about how men actually handle themselves around women, whether it's in the workplace, personally, so forth. Not to this level, but when you see these kind of things going on, you pop up your browser and you've got Yahoo News, or it's in the news on television, perhaps even in magazines. You would think that we're all just monsters out there.
Right, exactly.
And I think it kind of, quite frankly, sucks. Because that's not really who we are. But yet It takes even the simplest miscommunication. It could be, I want to reach out. You've got beautiful hair, because I really think you do. Oh, my God, he's sexually harassing me. I feel that I need to be vindicated about something like this. I mean, what is really going on out there that we get so crazy about what we think is happening?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on. One is that there have been always a small group of men in every society through every period of history that used their physical strength, because generally men are physically stronger, or used their power in that they tend to have, more money or more position in the world in terms of their dominance. And so a small group of men have used their power to harass women, to abuse women, to, the whole Me Too movement has pointed out, rock stars, people in business, people in the movies who had power. And that's the key. It's the people who had power and abused that power. And as a psychologist, what I realize is not everybody, even in the small group who has power, abuses their power. And the small group of them are people who were abused themselves as children. I can guarantee you that every Harvey Weinstein or any of the other, men that have been shown to abuse women sexually have themselves been abused when they were young. Now, it doesn't excuse their abuse of others, because most people who were abused when they were children don't go on to abuse others. But a small percentage who abuse others were themselves abused, and it's those people who we need to pay attention to. And so you point out that often the news, which is the second problem, is the media. We have a media that is increasingly dominated by a corporate media. It's big business, and business sells whatever their medium is, whether it's newspapers, advertising, online, or television, based on fear and controversy. So it sells if you can say, this person was abusive, and look out, this may be your next door neighbor, this may be somebody close to you. If this guy did it, how can you trust the man that you're sleeping with? And that's where it gets destructive. Not only it covers over the small number of people who are abused, and we tarnish all men, but we also don't protect women. We make women afraid of good men, and, as you say, overly sensitive to a compliment that they may think, geez, maybe this is abusive. And so we make people afraid to get close and afraid to love, afraid to connect. And that, in a sense, is double abuse. Not only do you not protect the people who are actually abused, you also disable people who, just want to get close, want to connect, want to, love each other, want to connect with each other like we've done for, as you pointed out in the introduction, males and females through the animal kingdom throughout evolutionary history back 1 billion years. There have been males and females, and the reason we're all here is that those males and females found a way to come together and have babies and raise those babies to adults who could do the same thing. So that dance of intimacy, sex, and love is a long one. We need to get better at it, not tell people that every encounter is in danger of being abusive. We have to call out the abuse that's there, but also call out the false allegations that are there as well.
Now, a lot of people have certainly heard about something called irritable bowel syndrome, but what about irritable male syndrome? What is that?
Well, a little background on how that came to be. I had written a series of books for men and the women who are involved with us, who are going through midlife changes, and we've all heard about kind of the midlife or midlife crisis. But what I found is that men go through not only a psychological change, but a biological and hormonal change as we get older. And I wrote a book called Male Menopause that became an international bestseller. It's been translated now into 14 foreign languages. I had a follow-up book called Surviving Male Menopause, a guide for women and men. And then a book called The Whole Man Program, Reinvigorating Your Body, Mind, and Spirit After 40. So I had written those books to help us understand the whole biological, psychological, social, interpersonal, sexual changes that happen with men as we age. And one of the chief symptoms, which everybody heard about, was men having problems with either their libido, their sexual desire, or also their sexual ability to keep and maintain erections long enough to have successful and satisfying intercourse. And everybody heard of the little blue pill, Viagra. But what people did not hear about was that a equally common symptom for men as they got older was irritability and anger. And the book Irritable Male Syndrome was based on some worldwide research that was done that indicated that as male testosterone dropped, the men would become more irritable and angry. And that was kind of counterintuitive because, again, what you'd read in the news was men who are usually bodybuilders or weightlifters or in some sports that were using high doses of anabolic steroids that were testosterone-like medications that would bulk them up and make them physically strong and also aggressive. But most men, the common experience was not high doses of testosterone causing irritability and anger, but actually loss of testosterone. And so the irritable male syndrome looked at 4 actual causes of irritability and anger in men, not just older men, but men of all ages. The loss of testosterone being one, particularly in older men as our testosterone drops, but also changes in brain chemistry, changes in stress levels, which were so many of us under more and more stress, and changing roles, which you mentioned earlier, that many times now we're confused about, well, what does it mean to be a man in today's world? What does it mean to be a good man? I used to know, at least I thought I knew what that meant, and the roles may have been rigid and the roles may have been restrictive, but at least I knew what they were. Now so many men don't know what their role is. And as a result, there's a confusion that often leads to irritability and anger. So I wrote a book called The Irritable Male Syndrome, Managing the 4 Key Causes of Depression and Aggression, that really helped uncover these and gave guidance for men and women that are concerned about male anger and irritability in their lives.
You know, it's such a fascinating world that we live in today, especially as we see how we communicate about things like this. You know, you have a world where homosexuality, the LGBTQ community is out there, and they're, you know, asserting who they are. And it seems that it's a stretch for me to say this, and I try to say it with the most loving kindness that I can, but the white male has turned into the minority. You know, hey, you know, maybe some of it has become as an action through the years of our own actions, it seems, you know, but the fact is it's hard to have a voice anymore to just simply say, this is me, you know, quit looking at me through the filter of what you think is your experience and see who I am and what I'm all about. It's really challenging to do that, but at the same time, I say to men out there, and certainly, you know, with your book, 12 Rules for Good Men, look, it's not a necessary thing to say assert yourself, but certainly stand and be proud of who you are. You know, maybe even in defiance of those situations where you're being called out on the carpet for responsibilities that you really don't have a whole lot of, you know, responsibility for, I guess. And it seems difficult, but I think that if a person can do this and be willing to do this courageously, you know, with pride, that certainly perhaps as they approach that midlife, they won't have to look back and feel that sense of regret. You know, I thought I was doing everything everybody wanted me to do, and I don't feel that kind of success happening or that feeling of gratification. But if you can do this and you're willing to do this, then I think probably that irritable male syndrome that we're talking about here might kind of calm down a bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you that 2 points that I would make about this. One is that that although the group of men who've been abusive to women and to other men, not just to women, is small, there's a larger number of us, and let's be honest, that saw abusive behavior or, you know, put downs or sexually aggressive things that we saw in our buddies, our people at work, and we didn't say anything. We didn't want to, you know, be called out. We didn't want to cause problems. So we may have seen abusive language or abusive behavior or bullying or negativity, but, you know, none of us want to stick our neck out in situations. And there are certain times of being a good man means stepping forward and saying, hey, to a buddy, you know, hey, that was a hurtful thing you just said about that woman or about that guy or that minority or that person who's, you know, gay or homosexual or different in some way than us. So part of being a man is stepping up and saying to somebody, that wasn't cool. You know, that I don't agree with that. Secondly, it also means being able to step up for what is good about being male. You know, to be able to say, hey, you know what? That stereotype, that isn't me. You know, I don't do those things, and I don't tolerate those things. And learning that so many of us, and again, that was the impetus for this book, so many of us have gotten timid in our lives, that we're so afraid of being saying something that's not acceptable, or saying something or doing something that may be interpreted, that we become very timid, almost little boyish, rather than proud, full men. And some of that's why rule number 1, join a men's group. Learn to be in a group of supportive, caring, loving men. You know, this group I mentioned I've been in that's been meeting for 40 years. I mean, we're all successful guys in our lives, in our world, but we've learned to break out of the man box and break out of the stereotypes, to be able to listen to each other deeply, to be supportive of each other, to talk emotionally about our feelings, to talk about what it's like being older men and going through illnesses and taking care of a wife that may be having, medical problems as we get. So all of these very real things that we all go through that we haven't talked about, we need to learn to step up and be more real with ourselves, more real with each other, and more courageous about how we present ourselves in the world. And that's why I call them rules, that sometimes men need to be guided to say, listen, follow the new rules. We've been following old rules that haven't been very helpful, and throwing out all rules and just saying, let's just wing it, let's just be, go with the flow, I don't think is optimal. But having real rules that can better ourselves, help our families, help our relationships, and help the world is something that I think all men and all women really want.
And I agree with you. For some reason, I was thinking about John Gray. He wrote Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars. And it was really, it was fun to think about what this guy wrote, a couple of decades ago. Yeah. And there's truth in it. I mean, women want to talk about their problems. Men want to solve those problems that are being talked about.
Well, that's been, and
it's really funny because that's who we are.
Well, it's a part of who we are, and part of what I want to do is not, in a sense, throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't want to say to men, listen, you should stop being the ones that solve problems, and say you no longer should do that. You should just be the listener. But I want to say, you know what? There's a time to be a problem solver. There's a time to take action, but there's also a time to be a better listener. Right. There's a time to tune in more and listen rather than, my wife will tell you this, and I think all our wives, would say this. Sometimes we're so intent on solving the problem, we don't listen closely to what our partner may be saying. And we're solving a problem before we even hear what the person says, and sometimes, and actually often most of the time, a woman wants to be listened to and heard and just acknowledged rather than a real quick, oh, I get it, now here, let me tell you what to do. Let me tell you how to fix it. And we got to get better at both. I think we need to honor that inherent male problem-solving energy, that testosterone energy, that that can do it, that action-oriented. All of that's part of being male, but that's not all of who we are. And we can also learn to be good listeners, good feelers, good tuning into our emotions and the emotions of others. And those are qualities that have traditionally been female, that we've told females often, you're the feeling sex. You're not supposed to act. You're not supposed to solve problems. That's men's world. Well, that's nonsense. We want to broaden, we want to build on our inherent differences and not try to pretend we're unisex and we're all the same, but at the same time not to be so rigid in our division that, I tell John, I know John Gray, and although the idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus is a very catchy title, and I wish I had thought of it, but the truth is that we're not from different planets, and we interact with each other in one planet and one world, and we need to learn from each other. And John would agree with this, and we need to accept our differences, but also recognize that there's a lot about us that's the same, and we all need love. We all need to feel good about ourselves. We all need to and want to take care of the children of the world. So these are interesting times. They're challenging times. They're difficult times, but they're also times that allow us and invite us to step up, to be bigger than we thought we were, to be more powerful and more effective and more loving than we ever thought was possible for many of us.
Yeah, and it was important, Jed, for me to bring that up because what you see, again, this is all about what we see and experience through other sources rather than direct experience. And I think that's really what seems to be lacking in the day and age of technology is that we don't have direct experience as much as perhaps we did decades ago. And the reason I brought up the idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and that men want to solve problems, that what you see today is this message. Okay, well, I've gotten myself into this situation, this problem. The man's not stepping up, and he's not solving this problem the way that he should be. And so therefore he's this,
Yeah.
And you really get a confused message about, well, what in the hell am I supposed to do then? What do you think? I'm not doing it the way it's perceived to be, the way it should be done. I'm not being a man. It's a woman who got herself perhaps into this situation. We're not, pointing fingers, but let's just say that. But that's kind of the message right there. It's almost like on both sides of the fence.
There's contradictory messages.
Right, exactly.
There's the message that says, it's your job to be the problem solver, and then
my
you
job
feel
to be the
bad
one creating the problems.
Right. You feel inadequate if you can't solve the problem, and sometimes women want you to solve the problem. Here, honey, fix this. And on the other side, we feel that we're not effective if we don't let a woman or another man, solve their own problems and listen to them and just hear them without jumping in to solve their problems. So part of what I do, I tell people that come to me and my website, menalive.com, I want to teach people how to be, I call it the graduate school of life. I want to teach people how to have effective relationships with themselves, with their partners, so that they can be really high level, get a PhD in all the skills that you need to be the best man you can be. We're talking to men, or for women equally. I said, you think men. You think men are simple. You think, you talk to your girlfriends, or you watch TV, or you go to the movies, and you have a perception of what you see in the media about men. And some of the problem that women don't understand men is that men have gotten afraid to tell them what our truth is because we're afraid you're going to judge me or put me down. So women and men need to have a graduate training in what it means to be a modern man. What does it mean to be a good man in today's world? And I don't claim to have all the answers. I've been doing this for a while. I've been married for, as I say, almost 40 years. My wife and I have 5 children and 17 grandchildren. And so we've had some experience that we share through our books, through our seminars, through our classes, and we're continuing to learn as well. We don't know the answers to all the issues, and we want to learn more from the people that come and work with us.
Yes, I certainly agree. And to embrace, malehood is a good thing. I mean, that's what you were born into. So grab it, claim it, and own it, is what I suggest you do. And, stay away from reality television. That's not real. And what I like about your website, and I'm on it right now, menalive.com, is it has this for you guys out there, if you're interested, is that you can take the Irritable Male Syndrome quiz. What do they discover on something like that?
Well, this is very interesting. That quiz, which, as you point out, you can take on my website. It's one of the most popular parts of the website.
I'm sure it is. Am I an irritable male?
Yeah, people want to know, and what does that mean? And am I one? And what do I do about it? And it was really developed as a research tool for the book that I mentioned, The Irritable Male Syndrome, and it was posted on a website. And we started with about 1,000 men filled it out, and I wanted to see how women saw men. So we had about 500 women that filled out how they saw the men in their lives. And that was part of what we used then for the research for the book. But the quiz became so popular that I left it up after the research was done and the book was finished. And now we've gotten close to 75,000 men and women have taken the quiz. And it not only is a wonderful guidance where men will take it and say, you know, my wife's been telling me I'm getting more irritable and angry as I get older. I didn't believe her. But I took the quiz and I scored, this score, and it says I've got some significant problems. Maybe I ought to look at them. It also tells you one of a number of different types of male irritability. We found out that there's, 4 or 5 different types, and they respond to different kinds of approaches. So it tells you what type you may be, and then more importantly, it tells you, is this a no problem at all? You scored low. Is it a somewhat, small problem, or is it a significant problem that you need to attend to? And then we've got lots of resources. Once you know, if it's something to deal with, you can get help for it.
Well, I'm certain that people are going to find, especially men, your book very engaging and certainly a nice wake-up call as to, what our role is, what our responsibility is, and especially the authenticity of who we are. And it's exciting to hear someone like you out there who's talking about this, in a way that I feel is very healthy, that's very, introspective especially. And, again, your website is menalive.com, and that's how they can find also this book as well as the other 15 books that you talked about. Do you have any parting thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah, I would just say one thing. The book officially won't be released till the 21st of November. So if you're listening to this now and you come to the site, what I want to give you kind of a pre-book gift. I've written a very in-depth kind of complement to the book that gives you all the things that I've learned over the years that men need to know about what does it mean to be a good man and what's the basis of maleness that we're talking about. And I'm going to give that to free for people, if they get the book. And so if your listeners want to email me directly, jed@menalive.com, as soon as the book comes out, I'll not only tell you how to get the book, but I'll send you, this free resource for your listeners. And so, again, if they just email me at jed@menalive.com and just put free resource in the subject line, I'll know it's from your listeners. And as soon as the book's available, I'll let you know how to get it and get that free, really in-depth resource out to people. It's got all the things I've learned in these last 50 years, and I think you'll find it really, really helpful.
One thing I kind of wanted to leave our listeners thinking about today is something that I found as I went to your Twitter page, and I really got a kick out of this. It's the idea that marriages may, be falling apart as an idea of cheap sex. And here's what I was reading right here. It happens to be right under what seems to be a video of Whoopi Goldberg on The View, but it says, of course, men, like women, don't just want sex. In my popular article, The One Thing Men Want More Than Sex, you say that they want more than the sexual pleasure of getting off. Men want a safe harbor, a place where they can feel nurtured, cared for, loved, and appreciated for who we are. And anybody who's been in a good, long relationship, and we're talking about, that you've been in it for a while where you feel like you can talk to your woman and your woman can talk to you, you get to have that wonderful experience of knowing, damn it, I've been out there, it's been rough in the world today, and I'm going to come back home and I know that I can lay there in bed and I can just share what I feel about this whole thing and feel okay that I'm not going to be judged, whatever it is about the whole thing that I could just feel I could talk to somebody about it. And that there is gold, I mean.
Well, let me just add, an offer to your listeners. That article, the one thing that men want more than sex, has been read now by more than 2 million people. It's the most popular article that I've ever written. And if you are listening to this and you email me and mention the show or the free offer, I'll send you that article so you can have a chance to read it. It's out there, but you might have a hard time finding it. I'll send it to you, and you can read it at your leisure and let me know what you think.
And again, there it is. I was just, pointing out it's unique when you mature as a man and you realize we're not out there to throw the notch on the belt or perhaps the bedstand. That's right. Not really what we want. We really, men just like women, we just want connection, and we want to know that who we're connecting with is someone that we can feel confident about doing that with. And secure about. I mean, and I think that's inherent. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. I think that's in all of us. Would you agree?
Well, it is. And we've just had this, again, one of the stereotypes and one of the misunderstandings is, just as we started this interview, people have this very limited view of what really it means to be a man and what men are. And so part of my work over these last 40 plus years is to give people the facts. I'm a man. I've got sons, I've got grandsons, I've got kids, and I've been working with probably 50 to 60,000 people, and so I have a lot of direct experience that I can put at your disposal.
You're very zen on your men, aren't you?
Yeah.
I like it.
It's been a delight to be on the show with you, and I hope your listeners will contact me, and let's continue the dialogue.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. Jed, thank you for being on the program today. And again, your website is menalive.com, and you can find out how to get the book when it comes out, and you can find a lot of wonderful things there as well. Jed, thanks for being on the program today.
My pleasure. Take care.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. Keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.